Hello everyone and welcome to wait, that's the wrong show. Hello everyone and welcome to my review of Star Wars Battlefront 2, the classic version of Star Wars Battlefront 2. Now if you haven't already, I would recommend watching my Star Wars Battlefront 1 review from about a month ago or a month or two ago. I would recommend watching that first before this one because I'm going to make a lot of comparisons between the two. But here it is, Star Wars Battlefront 2 Classic, Battlefront 2 Proper, the better Star Wars Battlefront 2, or Battlefront 2 Supreme, whatever you want to call it, it's the better version of Battlefront 2. This game is known the world over for being one of the best Star Wars games ever made, and at the time it was actually the highest selling Star Wars game of all time. Everyone looks back at this Star Wars game fondly, and for good reason. A lot of the problems from the first game were ironed out and worked on, and the overall final product was just incredibly fun. But how is it going back today and playing it? Is it still just as fun when we take our nostalgia goggles off and really try to criticize it? Has this game aged better than its predecessor, or aged worse than a geriatric Luke Skywalker on a very strict blue milk diet? Let's find out.
From any side, in any vehicle, with any weapon. Star Wars Battlefront 2 on November 1st.
Let's get one thing out of the way first. For the most part, Battlefront 2 is still a huge blast to play. The gameplay still feels great and was perfected with the inclusion of heroes and space battles. Each time you jump into a game, you feel like you're jumping into an epic battle within the universe. There are still some problems, a lot of which I'll talk about here, but for the most part, this is a game you absolutely shouldn't miss. With that out of the way, even though I think the gameplay is nearly flawless, the game still has a lot of problems. For one, the map design this time around leaves a lot to be desired. You can tell Pandemic went for the bigger is better approach this time around and tried to make maps as big as possible. And while sometimes this feels great on maps like Geonosis, most of the time it feels completely unnecessary, like Kamino's added platforms that just make the map more of a slog to get around. But even some of the smaller maps included here have a lot of problems. Dagobah and Felucia stick out as huge blunders with random holes to fall into and way too many invisible walls everywhere respectively. The interior maps are also almost completely impossible to navigate around, the Death Star and Jedi Temple being some of the worst offenders with seemingly endless hallways and doors that are easy to miss. And don't even get me started on Mustafar. Ugh. There are a few diamonds in the rough though. Utapu and Kashyyyk immediately come to mind. These maps have long sight lines for snipers while also giving people cover along each side. This creates a circular momentum around each map that keeps the game moving and prevents bottlenecking, which is an absolute nightmare when playing single player. More on that later though. Also, all of the space maps, while incredibly simple and mostly copy and pasted, are gorgeous to look at and really fun to play. This is exactly what players wanted out of Battlefront's sequel, to be able to attack enemy ships not only from the inside but from the outside as well. You can completely destroy an enemy ship from the outside by flying around and bombing it, sure. Or you could land a ship inside its hangar and destroy it from within. But for the sake of balance, the ships can't be completely destroyed from the inside. You still need to venture out into space to destroy the ship's bridge and engines if you want to completely win. Easily the best thing about these battles though are the amount of options available to you. Do you want to get into dogfights and win only by outlasting the enemy? Go for it. Do you want to sneak into the enemy ship and destroy its vital systems from the inside? Have at it. Do you want to focus all of your time on barraging the outside of the ship until it's eventually destroyed? It'll take forever, but you sure as hell can do it. Space battles introduced something that the first game was severely lacking: direct player control. In the first game, you either had to capture points yourself or hope to God your allies would be smart enough to do it themselves. Now you can control the battle yourself with clear objectives that actually have an impact on the battle. Taking out a ship's auto turret systems makes flying around the outside of the ship easier. Taking out the ship's comms and life support affect the enemy's reinforcement rate. These things immediately change the battlefield, making the game feel responsive to what you're doing. You're doing more than just capturing points across the battlefield. You're directly annihilating your opponent, which feels fantastic. Oh, I didn't see you there. Now, space battles weren't the only inclusion from the first game. This was the first time in the series that you could play as some of your favorite characters from the Star Wars universe. But how are these characters balanced? Are they complete pushovers or unkillable gods like the first game? Well, thankfully, it seems like Pandemic spent a lot of their development time making sure that these characters were balanced on the battlefield, and it shows. Yes, I remember when I first got to play as Mace Windu on Geonosis. I finally got to feel the catharsis of laying waste to every single robot in sight. Playing as a Jedi in this game feels just as good as I hoped for from the first game. You have a multitude of attacks ranging from standard lightsaber slashes and throws to force push and even lightning and choke if you're playing as one of the other guys. But every single ability just feels right. Saber throws feel powerful and are incredibly effective against standard infantry, while standard slashes can help you in a pinch and build back some energy. As a hero, you can also generally jump higher and sprint faster than regular infantry, but that also drains some of your energy. This is where the balance for these characters comes in. Over time, time, your health or energy slowly drains. Using certain abilities makes this pool of energy fall even faster. When your energy is completely gone, your character faints and bows out of the fight. You can counter this drain though by killing enemies with your standard attack, which will slowly fill the bar back up if you kill enough people. This forces you to constantly stay in the action rather than camping at certain spots. If you want to continue controlling this badass character, you're gonna have to fight for it. This feeling continues with all the Jedi heroes who feel great, if not a little repetitive. Every single hero with a single lightsaber essentially plays the same save for a few different abilities. Multiple saber heroes, however, are unstoppable spinning tops of death that leave nothing but destruction in their wake. They get multiple hit combos that can clear an entire room in seconds. This makes heroes like General Grievous, Aya Secura, and Darth Maul incredibly fun to use. That leaves all the other heroes, the non-Jedi heroes that use blasters, and while they aren't nearly as fun as the others, they are just as powerful in the right hands. I like this balance. It makes sure that even the non-Jedi heroes still get some love in the hero versus hero mode, since they have a lot more range than their counterparts. For the most part, the heroes are handled incredibly well in Battlefront 2. I can't think of a single one that I didn't like playing as other than Darth Sidious, but I think his inclusion is more of a joke than anything. Add these heroes in with the new classes added to each faction, and what you're left with is an incredibly well-rounded experience. Each faction has 2 or 3 new or reworked classes that introduce new tactics and gameplay. A particular favorite of mine was the Gatling Gun Clone Trooper. Something about single-handedly spraying down tens of droids in seconds just was really satisfying to me. Oh, and don't forget my #1 rule, kids. Fuck droidicas. Hey. Now, Pandemic's new gameplay changes are completely welcome and introduce a huge amount of variety for the players. It's these kinds of changes that make going back to the first game a really big challenge because you miss them so much. But these weren't the only new additions over the first game. Pandemic wanted to finally give players what they wanted all along from the first game, a full-fledged campaign. With this game, they decided to go in a different direction that fans weren't expecting. It follows a battalion of clone soldiers from their first battles to executing Order 66 to trying to desperately save the Death Star and ending with the Empire's demise on Endor. It's an interesting concept that has you dancing around the line of good and evil and helps players sympathize with the soldiers on the dark side of things. What also helps is you are given unique objectives throughout each mission, so the variety is definitely there and keeps things fresh. But for the most part, the campaign just feels like a missed opportunity. Yes, you are playing as a clone trooper who is seemingly struggling with the fact that they are doing some shady shit, but they never fully deliver on this idea and it mostly just falls flat. You also miss out on some pretty huge moments from the films, like the destruction of the Death Star. Sure, you take part in a space battle around the same time as that event, but it would have been so much cooler if you had to try your hardest to defend the Death Star and ultimately fail. It could have driven the conflict home, where the clones are starting to doubt their cause only to be jolted back into patriotism by an act of terrorism in their eyes. Hell, this game could have drawn some pretty cool comparisons between this and post 9/11 America, but they never really even tried. I'm not saying the game has to have some super deep social commentary in it, but it would have been nice if they at least tried something and maybe have some sort of message come from this game's story. So while the campaign was a cool concept and is admittedly pretty fun to get through, they never really reached their full potential or brought the game anywhere narratively. It's not a huge con for most, and I understand that, but it's something that I would have and still would like to see from the Star Wars universe. I think one thing that also affected my opinion on the story is the fact that so many people gave it such high praise. I mean, one person on stream even told me that this story brought them to tears. I honestly can't understand what they're talking about because the game seemed pretty by the numbers to me, which I think led to more disappointment overall. So is the story bad? Not specifically, no, but is it uninspired and fails to take any risks? Absolutely. There are some other gripes I had with the game related to its AI, like the fact that you can't give specific commands to your AI partners anymore. This makes the fact that the AI is wildly inconsistent much worse. In the first game, the AI wasn't inconsistent, they were just consistently stupid. They refused to capture points and would sometimes ignore enemies in front of them. The AI in this game are somehow more competent and less competent at the same time. Now allies go out of their way to capture points, but at the expense of almost completely ignoring enemies around them. This means that most AI will make a blind rush towards the objective with little care of their own well-being. They are also completely useless in space battles, which I think is due to the nature of the new game mode. Now that you have specific objectives other than kill things and capture points, it seems like the AI just has no idea what to do. Just for an example, many times I would try to land a people carrier type ship at an enemy hangar and then offload every ally I had on board so that you could storm the enemy ship. It's a legitimate strategy that not only gives you a spawn point on the enemy's ship, but also lets you bum rush the enemy team. Almost every time though, one ally would stay behind on the ship despite my commands, promptly tank off, and continue to slam the ship onto the side of the hangar until the ship exploded. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw this, but I think it perfectly sums up how bad the AI is in this game. Pandemic massively improved the flight controls and mechanics from the first game, that's for sure, but the drawback seems to be that the AI in this game just can't understand how it works. This means that during space battles you're pretty much on your own when it comes to objectives. Thankfully, the enemy AI is equally as stupid, so they just don't pose much of a threat. However, the problems with the game's AI become really apparent within the smaller interior maps of the game. Remember how I talked about dead ends and choke points? Yeah, these cause huge amounts of frustration because it seems like every AI is attracted to them by some sort of Newtonian magnet. Seriously, most of the times when I lost in this game, it's because my allies absolutely refused to flank or take any other path than the shortest one, which meant that objectives that were far away were nearly impossible to acquire with any help. This means that for a lot of the missions in the campaign, you'll be left to complete everything yourself, which I think ultimately defeats the purpose of the game entirely. You're supposed to feel like a grunt amongst other allies working towards conquering the battlefield together. The first game captured this feeling pretty well by allowing you to give specific commands to control the unruly AI pretty consistently. But here you're given one simple follow command and that's it, and even then it barely works and the AI will still go on their own merry way more often than not. This changes the feeling of the game from being about massive battles to being about you, the savior, doing everything yourself, which is the exact opposite of what these games are going for. As I said in my last review, I'm all for taking extra steps to make you feel special as the player, that's fine. But this game doesn't make you feel special, it makes you feel like the only adult in a welfare daycare full to the brim with rebellious children who just refuse to drink their fucking juice box! That's kind of what this game's campaign feels like to play, which pulls it down even further than the disappointing narrative. So the story wasn't so great, and the AI still sucks, yeah, what about the thing that most people cared about in this game, the multiplayer? Well, if you're playing this game on consoles, I'm sorry, but you're totally out of luck. The servers were shut down years ago, and there's really no easy or legitimate way to connect to other players. However, and I honestly couldn't believe this when I learned it, the PC version of the game has servers live and open for anyone to play. That's right, despite the fact that the game suffered from the massive GameSpy closure a few years back, some lovely soul somewhere somehow reactivated the game's multiplayer but with new servers. This was done by GOG, who basically made the game work on their own servers alongside Steam. What this means is that now you can play with anyone at any time in Battlefront 2 on PC. This is kind of weird for me because I'm not used to reviewing games that not only have active online servers, but an active community along with that. Tons of people still play this game all day long, and you shouldn't have any trouble finding games online with full servers. Yeah, the online is kind of laggy and has some bugs to it, but holy shit, it actually works and for the most part plays great. I got it running flawlessly and had a great time, but just so you know, I've heard reports from people that the multiplayer for some reason doesn't work well on their system, so your mileage may vary. But holy shit guys, it actually works! Space battles, heroes versus heroes, conquest, even capture the flag. It's all here and you're bound to find a game for something you like. Bringing the servers back has breathed new life into this game like I've never seen, and it's still incredibly popular despite the new games being big blockbuster hits. It just goes to show that at the end of the day, sometimes people just want a good hit of nostalgia to wash down the cynicism of modern day games. And oh boy does it feel good. On top of this, the modding scene for the game is alive and well, most notably the conversion mod that brings back old maps and characters from the first game to make them work in Battlefront 2. This brings back some of the best designed maps from the first game and throws them in with the improved gameplay of this game. And honestly, with this mod I was in heaven. Now you can play all of your favorite maps, modes, and factions in one game, which is a great value proposition. I did have some issues with the mod, like the fact that some of the new factions don't work with the game's absolutely brain-dead AI, and the fact that I couldn't get the mod to work with multiplayer for some reason. Oh, and the mod added these obnoxious HUD overlays to my screen that I could never figure out how to get rid of, which was supremely annoying. But all of these problems could be ironed out if I worked more on them or chose more appropriate maps, so I won't dog the mod's creators too much for them. Honestly, right now is just a great time to get back into this game. Since the new Battlefront 2 is so incredibly disappointing in almost every way, it's nice to go back to a time when developers just wanted to make a game that was fun first and foremost. There's no extra DLC you need to buy or microtransactions slowing down your progress. Hell, there isn't even a progression system that you have to invest hours into get good. It's just pure unfiltered fun, and I think a lot of people could use that right now. So if you're struggling with the state of the games industry and its obsession with monetizing fun rather than delivering it, I highly recommend getting your hands on this game. Like I said, the multiplayer is still fairly active now and it's goddamn cheap basically anywhere you can find it. It has its problems, sure, but for the most part they don't take away from the incredibly fun and nostalgic experience. Now, I know I didn't address everything that's new to this game, like the fact that Galactic Conquest has been hugely expanded on, and the fact that there are a bunch of new modes to play. But I think my point came across pretty clear. Despite its flaws, Battlefront 2 Classic is still an absolute blast to play. I can recommend it to anyone, even people who aren't particularly huge Star Wars fans. It's just a really good battlefield simulator that doesn't compromise on fun, which is a lot more than I can say for some of the other games coming out today. But that was my review of Star Wars Battlefront 2 from 2005. I want to give a quick shout out to Justin, who recommended the review for both this and the first Battlefront. Justin, you're awesome, you're really great at supporting the show. And I'd like to thank you guys for watching as well. If there's something else you'd like me to review, leave it in the comments below. I might be able to get my hands on it. Keep in mind, I mostly just go to thrift stores and pawn shops and stuff to find games, so it's kind of depends on what I can find, but I mean, sometimes I find gems. I mean, I found this, which is super expensive. I found it for like $5, so hey, yeah, it always just depends on what you can find. For now, though, stay tuned for my next review, where I'm going to be looking a little bit closer into the lives of clone troopers, if you catch my drift. Clone troopers? Commandos from the Republic? Hey guys, Drew here again. Just want to let you know that I stream every day on Twitch, and I sometimes even stream the game I'm reviewing next. So be sure to join in there if you want a head start on the discussion. You can find my link to my Twitch channel in the description below. Thanks again, see you guys.